Each morning when we wake up, we find that we are like yesterday. The one who went to sleep is the one who wakes up. And that is because of the continuation of memories and goals of the future, things one has in the mind to do, the list one has gathered in the life, and that returns back. And what returns back is the accumulation of our identity. But every morning there is a very subtle form of change that happens, that occurs, and the change continues each morning. Each morning, immediately after waking up, there is something that is different. The energy, the feeling, the experience, the emotions, something is different and very, very subtle. So subtle that once the thought, the memory of the earlier day arises, or something in the to-do list triggers the human mind and memory, until that happens, the energy is different. And that can happen as soon as someone hears a voice from someone else or starts checking their notifications. Certain activity by will, by desire, and then the subtleness is gone. Each morning we are born a little different, vastly the same due to the connected memories, but subtly different each day. This subtle difference each day is of two kinds. First, there are patterns of the emotions, the feelings, the experiences of being in an early morning body or just awoken body. So there are certain changes that we can find repeats in certain form. For example, some days we wake up pretty anxious. Some days we wake up happy. Some days we wake up very ease in the mind and in the body, and someday we wake up not so ease in the mind, in the body. And that is because there are many cycles that we go through in the body, in the mind, throughout our lives. Largely, this spectrum of emotions and changes of desires, feelings, characteristics of oneself, these changes go unnoticed or is normalized and goes unnoticed. When these subtle changes are started to checked on, started to realize, these realizations becomes a factor of letting oneself realize even more subtle forms in which one is different and not so different from this universe and things that happens around. The subtle form we go, the more subtle form we go, the more we find that there is something that changes each day around of one's own self, one who calls I. Around that I, a certain something changes each day, yet the I is constant. So there is one form of seeing the patterns of the human mind, of the human biology, and there is the other thing that is the realization of something that goes through all of these phases. And now, whatever goes around and again comes around and goes around, this is one form, one pattern, and another is what we see as the time, as the body. As the body has certain time in this planet, we are bound to that time as long as we are bound to the body, as long as we are attached to the body. So this time factor, this biological factor, and in fact this universal, physical universal factor, these are bound to decay, to come into more and more form of ease, more and more balanced. So, the unchanging form, the unchanging experiencer, and indeed the unchanging witness in each one of us, to realize this witness, when one wakes up early in the morning, just with a little bit of silence, just knowing the feeling, the experience, the state of mind helps. Because once one starts checking on in one's own self, one's inner self starts expanding and becoming more and more conscious, because this is the phenomenon that goes through one's within, one's inner life, inner experience, inner being. So immediately after waking up, before the memories are completely arrived, before the energy to walk around and do something is fully active, one has to give time and space to one's own body-mind complex, to get them back, to make them ready for the day. And from this understanding, the practice of yoga early in the morning, the practice of meditation, exercises, running, swimming, any form of bodily exercises emerged from this understanding that it requires certain some time, and that certain some time is different in each individual. So each individual must find their own time. So there is a certain set of time for each individual in the morning to come back fully into their own selves and fully into their energy. Because the night one sleeps, or even the day when one is asleep and wakes up, this subtle form of understanding and being able to see the subtleness of one's own self shows that there is something, some gap that happens before a sleep, then after a sleep. In that gap, one forgets one's own self, one's own body, one's identity. One forgets everything and therefore is recharged. When one has no identification with language, body, mind, even spirit, soul, and even this universe, no identification, no words, no understanding of whatever is going on, and one gives up, then the existence pours in. So during the night we do not understand what happens, because each morning we wake up and we start going by our own lives. So largely we go about our life, and the phenomenon goes unnoticed. And during some practices in Tantra, the exercises of body, the exercises of breath work, the exercises of various mindfulness practices can bring one into this state where one is not, and again back one is. And this can happen both in conscious form and in unconscious form. When it happens in unconscious form, one drops off. He falls, she falls unconscious, and slowly the bodily conscious is retained and the mind comes back, and one finds suddenly surprised because a moment ago there was a chain of memory, a stream of consciousness going on, a stream of memory, a stream of mind going on. Then there was a certain break, and again a stream of consciousness returns back and continues. The memory returns back and continues. And in between, something happened, but the experiencer does not know what. There are exercises like Sasastra Vastika, which uses both breathing and bodily exercise. And after this practice, some people experience this unconscious state. Some fall, and therefore during this practice it is highly required that there is much space and the practitioner is in safe space and safe people around, so that something happens, then they can take care of the body, at least till the consciousness returns back. And for some, it happens even without the body going down. When one is fully conscious, it is visible that a certain something went away from one's experience and came back. So there is a tiny gap that happens where one is completely gone, one is not. Yet something is and is experienced. That small window between the unconscious, the conscious, is the middle way, is you, is the experience of this existence. So during practice, during meditation or during vipassana, any form of practice, the state that one is guided or encouraged to reach is this state between memories and non-memories, between I and the understanding of I, and when I is not. And when I is not, all of its belongings, all of its memories, stories, everything goes away too. So between these two states, one awaits, because one cannot do anything except for reaching to that state. Once in that state, one has to have the patience of waiting. That is the center, your center. Each one of us has the same center. Path can be different, but the center is same. In that center, we await, and while waiting, we can see that the happiness passes by, sadness passes by, jokes passes by, films, movies, friends, relatives, events, things passes by. And the more the things are visible that they go, they come and they go, the more one is bored of the universe. The more one is not, the more one sees the things coming and going, the more one is aware of one's own self. Because what comes and what goes, although it appears so much close to one's experience, is temporary. And in the language of Eastern philosophy and mysticism, Maya, an illusion. So when you realize the illusion, when you see the game, when you see the act, the play, the leela, you are simply put aside from it. And there is a subtle form of distance between the happening and the happened, the happening and the witness. The happened is in the past, the happening is in the present, the future is in the mind, and the witness is beyond past, present and future. The witness is nirantara, the continuation. So whenever there is a gap between each sleep, or when one falls unconscious, or when one loses memory and retains it back, the gap, just experience the gap, because that is the emptiness in which children are. They are in the gap, the fresh new gap, and now the world, now the family, now the circumstances, now the karma, and the gap is slowly filled to a degree that one identifies itself, himself, herself with the gap. But gap is simply gap. It's nothing. It does not exist. It's a void. And the accident of meditation is realization, acceptance, and witnessing of anything that goes around in this gap. So, whenever it's morning, you wake up and feel anger for somebody, simply know that it is part of a subtle cycle that goes on, and the cycle is within you. And just witness the anger. Witness it completely with love, as much as you would like to experience a dance, a singing, a poetry. Simply experience the anger as the poetry. Whenever each morning you wake up full of joy, experience the joy as a form of poetry the life has given to you. And indeed, if you really look at the incidents that happened in your life that brings you up to here, you will find a series of cosmic poetry happening in your life, a pattern that constantly pushes you to your own seeking, to your own searching, and the acceptance of your own self. It becomes a poetry, and when someday you wake up really sad, enjoy completely the sadness, as also it is part of the same poetry, the same thread of stories that one goes on weaving and then ultimately offers the weaved story to this existence. And that is bhakti, the offering of all one's suffering, all one's happiness, all one's whatever one is made up of, to the unknown, And this is bhakti, the devotion. And without this devotion, the mind slowly starts becoming disoriented. When one has continuous desire for having something and no understanding of what that is providing. So what is providing is unknown because it cannot be named. Whenever we name, we fail because the experience is similar all around the world, but the names are different. Language is different, culture is different. The experience is same. Therefore, gurus go on sharing about the importance of silence. Therefore, I also see the actual communication, the cosmic communication can happen in silence. And when that happens, all involved practitioners experience something together. So when anger comes and engulfs you, just know that it is temporary. When love comes and engulfs you, also know that it is temporary. Any form of emotion that becomes heavy on oneself, know that it is temporary and surrender to this unknown. Surrender to this unknownness. Because largely, people who are deeply in devotion, even in any form of religion, any form of religious groups like Christianity, Hinduism, Buddhism, even if they have a deity and they have a devotion towards that deity, it is largely because of the unknown. Because people only know a few part of what the story has been told again and again, and they do not know a huge part of that particular deity's life or existence, and cannot be known unless one dives within one's own self and realizes all the lightness and all the darkness. So it does not matter in which language, in which story one tries to guide someone or one tries to guide one's own self towards one's own center. It does not matter, but the action that tried to do so counts. Because anything in this earth is a constant action, a constant karma. Even if someone does not do anything, it is still an action, a karma. So it does not matter in which language one speaks, through the language of karma, through the language of reincarnation, through the language of emotional cycles, through the language of religion, through the language of Bible, through the language of Gita, through the language of a Zen book. It does not matter. It only matters if there is the search, the thirst, or we can even take this topic and convert into the surrenderingness, the offering of one's own existence to this existence. So it does not matter which story we tell. It always comes to the same point, and that is you and how you are experiencing this moment here and now. So take some time each morning to thank, and indeed really thank this existence. And if you fall unconscious sometimes during practice or none, thank for the experience. Witness completely and thank for the experience. Fill yourself with gratitude. And if every one of us are able to do so, the world is really a beautiful place to live in. a huge gift from the unknownness. This much for today.